Welcome everybody to this Myology Café, January Myology Café. We are launching today a new format, so it's something that we have been doing during the last two World Master Society congresses, where we have had some interviews with key opinion leaders. We have also had some debates that have been recorded and are available for you all in the YouTube channel. But today we wanted to do one live event where we are going to have an interview with Professor Nathalie Goemans. And then we are also going to have a debate with not only Nathalie, also two experts in Duchenne and in neuromuscular diseases in general, like us, Professor Michela Gulgieri and Dr. Liesbeth de Waele. So for me, it's a real pleasure to be here, and let's see how it goes. We are a bit nervous because it's the first time that we are doing this live. I hope that you enjoy. So let's start with some introductions. I have not introduced myself. I'm Jordi Diaz-Manera. I am Professor of Neuromuscular Diseases here at Newcastle University. Nathalie, would you mind to introduce yourself to the
Yes,
audience?
I'm Nathalie Goemans. I am a pediatric neurologist by training. I spent my career at the University Hospitals in Leuven, in Belgium, where I had the honor, the pleasure to lead the neuromuscular program for children for over 30 years.
Perfect. Michela, would you mind to go ahead?
Hello, I'm Dr. Michela Gulgieri. I'm a consultant adult neurologist by training, but really neuromuscular specialist because it's where I develop all my professional career is seeing patients with neuromuscular diseases. I have a specific interest for Duchenne muscular dystrophy and have been involved in several clinical trials and in the drug development program in Duchenne.
Thank you. And Liesbeth?
Yes, so my name is Liesbeth de Waele. I'm also a child neurologist by training, and I hope you will agree with me by the end of this interview that I'm the lucky one because I had the pleasure and honor to work with Nathalie Goemans for 8 years. So I was introduced by her in the field, in the wonderful world of neuromuscular disorders, and I took over from her in 2020 here in the University Hospitals in Leuven as coordinator of the neuromuscular program for children indeed. So we have a lot of clinical work, but also clinical trial experience and academic research related to neuromuscular disorders in children. So very, very happy to be here.
Perfect. So, well, today the idea is that, as I said, we want to interview Nathalie because Nathalie is in the process of retiring. I don't know if you are fully retired yet, or
I can develop. I consider myself as fully retired.
Okay, so
officially it was since 2020. I have still a couple of activities, but my main occupation now is being retired.
Okay, so you have been key in many things that has happened in the neuromuscular world, especially in Duchenne and SMA in pediatric neuromuscular diseases. Of course, you are a neuropediatrician, but also very relevant in your activities in the World Master Society, from educative activities, etc. So we thought it was important to have a meeting with you to go a bit through your career and also discuss about Duchenne muscular dystrophy in general. So we have prepared some questions for you about when did you start, etc. So going a bit through your life. And I would like to start with the question. So I would like to know, when did you get interested in neuromuscular diseases and why?
Oh, yes, so as I mentioned, I was trained at the University Hospitals in Leuven, and after my training in medicine and in pediatrics, I was sent to the Netherlands for 1 year on neurophysiology. And once I came back for taking again a job at the University Hospitals in Leuven, my mentor, my professor, Professor Cazard, asked me if, aside of general pediatric neurology, I would consider to develop interest in neuromuscular disorders in children. And I'm talking about the late 80s. So it was at that time like the gene of this dystrophy was just discovered, and otherwise it was, well, there was nothing there at the moment. And in the hospitals, in our hospitals, I think there were just a handful of patients that were known as being patients with neuromuscular disorders. And especially because at that time you had those patients, the diagnostic process was really a long process, and you were just trying to find the diagnosis, and then you had a diagnosis, and then they were sent home, and often they had no reason to come back. They came back 1 year later to hear again that they had the disease and nothing was going to happen. And so patients were not staying there. So there were really, really few patients. And so it has been, I just jumped into the program. I didn't know much about. I knew about Duchenne, SMA, but otherwise my knowledge was very limited. And so I know maybe there are questions about my mentors later, but what happened then is that I said, yes, I consider to go to have more insights in neuromuscular disease, but I really have to learn about because I know absolutely nothing. And so one of the ideas behind was to send me to Viktor Dubovich. So I first took a couple of work, how you say, so training courses with Dubovich. And then I think for 1 or 2 years, I came every Friday, once a month, the Friday for the clinics. So I was privileged to be there for the clinics at the Hammersmith Hospital at that time. And once or twice a year, Professor Dubovich was coming to our center to discuss difficult cases. So, and I must say, when I start, so my interest for neuromuscular disorders was just, I knew nothing when I started, and then this field opened, and I jumped in this field at a time where it really, I'm very grateful. I have been seeing all this development.
Michela, I think, okay.
Yeah, and it's very nice to hear this story. And as mentioned, I was going to ask something about the mentor you mentioned, Professor Dubovich. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience and about your mentorship and what brought into your career and your development?
Well, I think there I can be, I think my mentor for pediatric neurology was Professor Kazar. He really, when I was in training for pediatrics, I discovered the field of child neurology, and I was really, I thought this is really very exciting field, because in the neurology, child neurology, you really need a lot of like these subtle clinical symptoms and signs to come to a diagnosis, and all these rare, ultra rare diseases trying to, it's like a detective world of a detective. So I really enjoyed this part of the job. And on the other hand, Professor Kazar was already doing this kind of multidisciplinary clinics for cerebral palsy. So I got a sense of not only giving a diagnosis, but also trying to do more on for the families and the patients. And also there was these programs of having time to do all the assessments and diseases. So for the child neurology, there was Professor Gazar. For neuromuscular disorders, I must say it was truly Professor Dubovich, but yeah, to be honest, I felt a bit lonely afterwards. I mean, I don't have many more. How can I say? I think I am like a really a self-made person, which is a pity, because I mean, I wish I had more mentorship. I think things would have been moving faster if I had mentorship, and not only personally for myself, also for the centers, but I think I went also to Canada for like rehabilitation, to look at rehabilitation centers to see how they were organizing care. I went to visit different centers. That's for sure. That's a lot of activities I did to improve our neuromuscular care. I went at the early times. I went to France, to Fardeau. I went to Garches. I learned about the orthopedic aspects, about the respiratory aspects, and I really tried to bring all the things I had learned to the university hospital, and I did there my battle to introduce aspects. And I think more particularly, for instance, I'm still from the time where ventilation, non-invasive ventilation, or even the idea of ventilating patients with degenerative disorders was like, is this okay? Shall we do this? Is this ethical accepted to prolong the life of children or patients or young adults with such diseases? So truly, I had to fight for this and lobby for this in my own hospital, and try to identify individuals that were open for this kind of discussions. And so I've been lucky. So I think that's all the red line in all my career. I've been lucky in meeting people and finding the people that would help me in doing this. And so yes, that's my mentors.
So maybe I can go. I would like to go back to you. You mentioned your training in outside Belgium, so in the Netherlands, and then also with Professor Dubovich. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that and how that's impacted your further career, or what it meant for you?
I think my very first, you may know, well, when I was in training at that time in Belgium, for instance, in the pediatric training, it was very limited. It was even difficult to go outside our own hospital. We had to train in our hospital. During my medicine, I went for 4 months to Leicester in the UK, and that was for the pediatric department. And the first thing for me to go to another country, and especially another kind of organization of the healthcare, was very, very informative. So I think it's always very good to go and see other places as well. And then in the Netherlands, again, there my work was focused on neurophysiology and encephalography mainly. I forgot most of it, I must say, but it was very interesting again to see how healthcare is organized in another country, and obviously I learned a lot of things, but I didn't apply this immediately to my later career, to be honest, because I did epilepsy, of course, in the beginning of my neuropediatrics, but later on it came a bit more on the background. And then, yes, definitely going to Dubovich was very, very, very interesting. He is really the one who has taught me all the clinical aspects of the diseases, and also give me the how can I say, the incentive to also to go to the neuropathologist. I was very lucky also to have a very committed neuropathologist at that time in Leuven, because again, I'm talking about the era where the clinics and neuropathology were like the key elements to come to a diagnosis, and genetics were emerging. So we finally fused also with the genetic departments. But this combination of neuropathology and clinic is certainly something I have to thank Victor Dubovich for giving me these insights, and he really, yeah, he has been key for me, yes, for my career, yeah, in my interest developing my career, yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that you were lucky to meet certain people who influenced your career, but I just want to turn it around. I think you are one of the people who know to find those people in a way. So it's in two ways. And then the next question. So you mentioned in the beginning there was like nothing for these patients. There was no organization or setup or system for neuromuscular patients. There were just a few, and there was nothing to offer them in a way. So can you maybe describe how it was in the beginning, being nothing then, that's simple, but how that changed over the years during your career, and how this benefited the patient community in the end?
Yeah, I think that's, as I mentioned, so when I was working with Professor Cazard, and I was doing a lot of clinics, obviously, and I was involved in what they were calling the multidisciplinary clinics for the cerebral palsy, which was mainly orthopedics, or us, neuropediatricians, and then paramedical team that was there. And so during this multidisciplinary clinic, I sneaked in patients with neuromuscular disorders more and more, and at the end I had my own neuromuscular clinic with the same people that were like the embryonal stage of the multidisciplinary team. And so it became clear that yes, we needed more more people to do to fulfill the aspects of multidisciplinary care. And I think especially for those neuromuscular disorders, I felt so deeply that it was important not only to give a diagnosis, but to give something more for these families. And again, I've been so lucky, and we have been part of it at the last decade of my career, to have really committed people, social assistants, nurses, physiotherapists, at it took a while, but also a good psychologist, a very good psychologist. All these people, and also the going to a pediatric cardiologist, Benedict Esk, and then a good pediatric pneumologist, the gastroenterology. But orthopedic surgery was also quite important, as you know, especially in our neuromuscular clinic, has played a critical role. But then suddenly there came this McKenzie audit in the hospital, and as you may imagine, this is a disaster. Multidisciplinary clinic is a disaster for hospital because it costs a lot. It's very time costing and so on. But like a year or two before, together with my colleague Peter van den Berg at the UCL, the French-speaking part of the university hospitals, and the parent organization, we were lobbying at our national health insurance system to provide a financial envelope to cover the costs of coordination of care and advice for patients with neuromuscular disorders. This would already help a lot to defend our position in the hospitals, to say where we bring some money in, and it's not like a financial disaster to do this essential multidisciplinary care for patients. And so yes, it took a while, but after 1999, so we were able to have what we call a convention with our National Health Institute. And obviously, as it's often the case, the other hospitals and other universities were also interested, and also were intended to develop also multidisciplinary care. And so in Belgium, we then at that time had like 6, later we had 7 neuromuscular reference centers for neuromuscular diseases that had to fulfill a number of criteria to be admitted as a neuromuscular reference center. And it's mainly, it's covering the university hospitals in Belgium, and it gives an envelope for organizing the care. Yeah, Liesbeth knows the details how well this is, but at least there was something, and we could really speak with the hospital management about this program, and that and McKenzie and so on. That it was yeah. And then what this is for the patients, it has been key. I think this is absolutely key to have a multidisciplinary care. And well, I think. At the end of my work, when I see all the messages of people, how they have experienced multidisciplinary care, what this has meant for them, I think this is really, really important, because I think sometimes often even I had the question, is this not terribly sad to do this work? You are working with patients, especially before we had even treatment, patients that have such a bad prognosis, and they are just, is this not a really sad work? But the fact that I truly think you can offer something for the patient, you can make it with a team, you can make a difference in their life and in the quality of life, so I say no. I think this is really worth and it is really relevant and key for the patients.
Yes, definitely. I can endorse that. It's extremely important that they keep telling us every single time we see them that multidisciplinary care is so valuable.
That Michela has just disappeared. Probably she's having some issues with the connection. So do you want to go ahead, Liesbeth, and ask the next question, which is Michela's question?
I will take over then from Michela, and it's a nice question, I think, because it's a little bit more about, I think, some challenging element of being a woman in this world, in this field, in medicine, not only in medicine. But the question was, so you started your career and raised a family, a big family, I can say, in a time when there was far less equality in the workplace between men and women. And I'm very sure, and I'm speaking from my own experience, it really inspired other women in our field, not only in our field, but far out of it as well. So what would be your advice, or how did you get into that balance between your family and your career internationally as well? What are the tips and tricks?
Yeah, I think it's always funny when I hear that I'm like how can I say an example for women, because I think I'm a very bad example, because my career is really has been a disaster. My academic career has been really a disaster. I look with a lot of pleasure and warm memories to what I've been done to my work, but I'm not a good example. I'm not sure if you are aware, the one who are listening. I did my PhD when I was over 50. Really, yes, you hear well. So I can say patience. To have the patience to wait and not having everything on the same time. And I think it's very personal how you manage your work-life balance. It's about your own preferences and choices, and it's difficult to make an advice. I think the advice for me has been: look forward, don't look backwards, don't be frustrated by the things that you haven't been able to do at some stage because there were other commitments or other activities, and just go further for your aims, and just, yes, try to achieve what you want, but don't you have to accept that there are so many things in life, and sometimes it's really difficult to have them all together. And I'm a product of my generation, and I think my time, it was like, yes, motherhood was for me very, very important and key. And I've had a lot of luck. Again, I've been very lucky with my children, with my family, because I never had really big or long-lasting issues. We had issues, we had also concerns at sometimes, but it all went well, and my children were doing well. They didn't have big problems at school. But I know that at every time, if there had been something, how can I say, where I would have had the feeling that it was impacting the or family life. I am from a generation myself, so I'm not a good example. I would have said, okay, I try to fix it in a way that my family is not suffering too much. But so, for instance, at some stage I haven't mentioned yet, but during all my career and still now, I'm consulting in a big institution for children with impairments. And so I was going there once or twice a week at that time. It has been a bit fluctuating. And when my eldest was 15 and my youngest 8, it was quite, I felt it's very difficult to do all the thing, and commuting to Leuven and etc. And I got the offer to become medical director of an institution for impairment, and was close to the home, and so on. And I thought, yes, probably this is a better choice, and I should do this, because this will be a better work and balance. But my children came to me and they said, we heard that you may change your work, but consider, you don't have to do this for us. We are doing fine. We know that you like your work in Leuven, so please don't make this choice for us. Just go ahead with what you want. And so for me, it was very, very important, because I felt, yeah, this is it. But on the other hand, if it had been another discussion, I truly think that I could have changed work and then be happy as well, because saying, okay, then I go for this. So I don't think I'm a very good example for the women now. What I would say is, yes, try to combine both, because and try to find a balance. And there will be times in your career where you will have to go a bit down. This is reality, and you may feel, oh, this is not how can I say, man, it's not equal with man. But yeah, I think this is also reality. If you yeah. Also, if they had I'm definitely in our family, I was the one who have put aside for a while my career, but it was my personal choice. But I think I would have been like, yeah, I want to be at home more than my husband at that time. So it's really personal. So there can be women that say, okay, no, I really prefer my husband to be at home. I will do the hard work. But yeah, it has been I don't know how we did. I don't know. But we managed. Yeah, we survived. I remember I was exhausted at some times. I remember now. I remember it was hard sometimes, but it was most of the time, yeah, it was at the end, it was worth doing this. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure you were exhausted, and I think that you're very humble. So we can probably, because I'm conscious of time, we can probably move directly into the debate.
Yeah.
And maybe I think we can start. So the idea now is that we are going to have a debate with Liesbeth and Michela, who is already here. I have seen her with the camera on, and you as well. So and that I would like to focus the debate in Duchenne, what has happened so far, and especially the future, what is coming. So the question is for the three of you, so you don't need to be the only one answering this. So please, Michael and Liesbeth, go ahead. So you the three of you have participated in many trials in Duchenne and probably many other diseases. Nowadays there are many diseases that where we have trials. So, but specifically for Duchenne, how do you see the new therapies for Duchenne, and what do you think are the most promising drugs that are coming? So who want to start? Michela, you want to start maybe?
Yeah, I'm happy to start saying, I think that, so obviously, probably I need to start saying that Duchenne muscular dystrophy is a complex disease. And I'm not really convinced that we can really see what is the most promising and what is the one where we should invest and what will fix the problem. But probably we, as Nathalie actually well introduced, the fact that it is a multisystemic disease and there are different aspects that might not be fixable in once and might be relevant in a different way for different families. And I think that we need to recognize this complexity and this diversity, although we tend to consider Duchenne as a quite harmonized and predictable disease. I'm also thinking about, if you think about what is Duchenne and in terms of what is the organism that affected is the muscle, how big and how diverse the muscle role is in our body, is thinking about which are the perfect drugs that could fix this problem. And in a sense, what I see, and I know that is part of the debate itself, is obviously the ideal drug is the one that fixes the problem from this origin. So all the approaches that are targeting the dystrophin, especially the dystrophin gene, I think that has the principle to have more chances in the long term. But whether these will be able to work independently from other interventions that preserve the muscle and its integrity in order for other drugs to continue to work is to be seen. And the other aspect that I want to mention is that there is one component that we are quite ignoring the treatment at the moment, that is the brain involvement in Duchenne. And therefore, I don't have that drug to say what is the most promising that target also the brain.
I agree. I don't know, Nathalie or Liesbeth, if you want to add anything to this.
Well, I can only I fully agree with what Michela has been saying, and I think again addressing the complexity of the disease is very important, as well indeed the aspect of the brain, because we with all the experience we have now with these families, I think all of us will admit that brain aspects can have such a big impact on the quality of life and family life of these patients, that we don't have to just look at the muscles and what we are doing there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I think that of course there is a lot of research in trying to understand the role of dystrophin in the brain, but as far as I know, there is, because we don't really understand what is exactly doing, but there are still not drugs trying to tackle that, right? So that's a very important aspect, and so. But we have seen during the last, so I remember when I started doing neuromuscular disease, that was 2001. At that moment, where is exactly where we were discussing if patient needed to be treated with steroid or not. That was the discussion. During the last 24 years, we have seen lots of studies in Duchenne, many different drugs, trying the one that are trying to modify the gene somehow, but other drugs as well. And the reality is that after 20 years, it's true that we have seen some changes, but the main changes are done by these steroids that we were discussed when I was starting. Why is so difficult? And it's, Michela, you were saying the muscle is very complexity, but Liesbeth, what is your opinion? Why you think it's so hard to find the drug? Is because we don't know enough about the process of degeneration in this disease, because the kids are growing? Why is so difficult in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it was already partly said that the complexity there, different tissues that are affected. So it's the skeletal muscle, but it's also the cardiac muscle, and then definitely the brain. And parts of the disease we do understand quite well, I think, in the muscle phenotype and what's happening in the muscle. The brain is still a question, but it's also this degenerative, progressive character of the disease, and the fact that the tissues that are affected are all over the body. It's very different from SMA, where you target your motor neurons. It's not only motor neurons, I know, but it's like a limited amount of cells in a limited location. This is completely different already for Duchenne. It's also not an enzyme that is like secreted or produced in a certain organ and then goes to the body. So it's many different tissues all over the body, and this makes it so complex. And the process is already starting very early on, probably, but when is then the ideal time window? There's this classical discussion about the window of opportunity, depending on what treatment you are looking for. So I think really the complexity of this disease, and then I mean all the different tissues, because there are different tissues affected, that makes it so challenging, and to find this one medicine or maybe two that can target all these tissues and all these problems.
So,
and I think that we can add that it's true that we know the role of dystrophin in skeletal muscle overall well, but is expressing, as Liesbeth said, in several tissues, and the exact role of dystrophin in all tissues is unclear. Mm-hmm. So when we fix or we produce a certain dystrophin or fix a certain mutation, what are the implications in different organs? It's something that we are not even exploring at the moment, because we are obviously targeting the main issues. And this, I think, that is, so there is, although is one of the diseases obviously genetically recognized earlier, and probably with the most research, if we think about the neuromuscular condition, is also the one where I think that the basic of the lab research is still very useful in order to better improve treatment opportunity and management.
Yeah, I think as well that even if you would only target the muscle, because we know, this is a primary symptoms and most striking aspect of the disease, there are so many muscle cells to target. That's in my opinion also the problem. It's so many cells you have to target, and also muscle mass that is also changing and evolving. So for instance, for gene therapy, how long will this last? Once you have treated this, how long will this muscle mass? So I think these are the problems. Yes.
But this brings me also to two other questions. So the first one probably is, okay, so you have mentioned that there are multiple tissues affected, and there are also patients that are having variability in the disease. So and what we see now is that, on the one hand, so it seems very cool, all what is related with gene therapy. No, gene therapy seems like the promising drug, and it has always been like that. When we were talking about ataluren, was something that was acting on the stop mutation. Then we had the oligos. Now you have the AAVs. But what we are seeing is that other drugs that are not gene therapy are being approved at the same time and in parallel. And sometimes I have the impression that we have been neglecting a bit these drugs that were not acting directly on the dystrophin gene, that were just pro-regenerative drugs or anti-fibrotic drugs or anti-inflammatory drugs. So do you think that in the future we will have combination therapies for patients with Duchenne? Is this your impression, or you think that we are going to have the perfect one and only drug? Who wants to go with this?
I'm happy to start, and I generally don't think that we will have one drug that fits all. And also, I would also like to remind everyone that when we think about gene therapy or genetic approaches for Duchenne, we are not restoring a perfectly normal dystrophin, so we are not actually fixing the problem. So either whether it's gene therapy, is oligo, or is ataluren, is just to produce a dystrophin that is not a normal dystrophin. So we'll still have something that will be not completely fixed, and this is probably the biggest issue or biggest component. But also, as Nathalie mentioned, the reality to be able to target with any gene therapy intervention each single muscle cells is probably not realistic. So the idea of a combination therapy or something that preserve the muscle in order, for example, of these gene therapy approaches to act better or for prolonged periods of time, I think that is the only way. And it's not only, I'm also asking whether, again, we will have different approaches for the pathophysiology in the skeletal muscle, but what about the heart and what about the brain? Are we going to use the same approach that target all tissues, or we actually have two different approaches for skeletal muscle and something different for the brain and something even different for the cardiac? And I think that also these aspects are a different level. We have a lot of interventional advanced therapy for the skeletal muscle, when for the brain, we are still debating whether we should prescribe a common medication that are used in other indication of autism. So these are all things that make me feel that we're very unlikely that we will have one treatment for all.
Yeah, I completely agree. I could not have said it better. I mean, and if we find some way forward, it will be a combination, I think, of several products.
Yeah, and I think there are also promising us, how can I say, research on the downstream effects of the dystrophin, lack of dystrophin. I think targeting the dystrophic process is something that, yeah, we should further explore, because we have been, as you say, antisense oligonucleotide, read-through molecules and gene therapy. We've been there, but now, yes, we need to understand better what the dystrophic process itself and how we can target it. Yeah.
So just moving into then the clinical trial design, because something that it's also interesting and based on what you have said before. So I think that sometimes we have the feeling that the Duchenne is the same always. So the disease is the same when you have 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years, 12, 16, 20. If I ask you this question, you will say no. It's not the same. You have patients that at the early ages have these problems and then they evolve and have these other problems. But we are using, or we want to use the same treatment always. Is this correct? Should we have treatments that are tailored to the clinical situation of the patient? Is this something that is studied in trials? And if not, why is this? Because we don't have enough patients? Because we don't know enough? What do you think, Nathalie?
Yeah, if it's okay, yeah. I think you are completely right, and I think if there is something that we have learned is a natural history of the disease, that it's changing over time, and not only clinically but also pathologically. The pathophysiology is also evolving. I think now in the clinical trials there are some. There is indeed what should be done is thinking what is the mechanism of action, and is this a mechanism of action that will be more effective in the young ones, because at that stage we said a very strong inflammatory process, dystrophic process, or do we have to go? Do we have to use other drugs in the stage where there is more like fibrosis and so on? At the moment, I think that the choices of companies to which population they will choose is more like opportunistic. Like, are there enough patients in this age group to look for this for this trial? Or yes, there is competition at the moment for this age group. Let's go to another age group. And now I think that's great. They are also trying to do more trials also in non-ambulance, which is good, but again, there we know there is less muscle mass, so the chance to make changes there is difficult. So I think indeed what I've learned in all those years of clinical trials is indeed that it's very, very challenging to define the right population, and the base should always be what's the mechanism of action and where shall we find the best. And then again we will have to have the how can I say, the honesty also to say this is a drug that is most effective in this age range, and maybe not for the whole approved for the whole population.
If you think about it, sorry, go ahead, Liesbeth.
No, thank you. So if I may add, I was involved in a few patient preference studies, and if you ask patients of these several age groups and several stages of the disease, other things are important for them, and other aims they want to achieve with therapies, that they are different. So I think it's a very relevant question, and it's not really taken into account in current clinical trial design in Duchenne, but it's a very important point.
I want to also add that actually you are absolutely right, Jordi, and I think that the clear example is the corticosteroid. So we know corticosteroids are prescribed in a young age, and there is a rationale about the inflammatory component of the muscle in early stage of the diseases. And although we have an increased number of evidences that the effect of corticosteroid is prolonged throughout their lifespan once they are started in young age, there are no studies that actually have really explored the fact, does it make any sense to give corticosteroid at the later stages as a first line of treatment? And these are treatments that are in common use for a long, long time, but we do not know this answer even for corticosteroid. So it's not been, I think, the focus, and I agree with Nathalie, that is a combination of the difficulties to design studies in older population or selected population. And one of my, in a sense, concern, or at least what I think that in Duchenne we really need to evolve, is that the difficulties to study these aspects is becoming harder and harder and harder, with a much more diverse care in terms of treatment option and treatment of opportunity. If we think that there are treatments now that are not only different treatment approved in different countries, but also different treatment, the same treatment approved for different population in different countries. So we are really making the perfect clinical trial design almost impossible to be delivered in the upcoming years in Duchenne. And how are we facing this? And how can we learn from other diseases? Because I'm absolutely sure that it's not just Duchenne, but I think that is the next phase that we will need to approach.
Yeah, sure.
Absolutely. So there are many other questions that are here that I would like to ask you. But now you have mentioned, Michela, steroids, and I want to ask you, because you have been very much involved in the vamorolone design and the history of this drug. So this is now approved. I don't know where it's approved, if it's approved everywhere or not, but it's a drug that is coming. And do you think that this drug is going to substitute the steroids? Yes or not? And so if this is a better drug in terms of reduce adverse effects, why do we need for this drug to be approved or to be implemented in the health systems?
So yes, I mean, first, vamorolone is the first drug that actually has been approved across all the main regulatory authorities, so FDA, EMA, and MHRA, which is interesting because Duchenne is really the only one so far. And it's also interesting that also within these regulatory approvals, actually the indication is different in terms of the age where it can be administered, but also how the drug is presented is different. So in Europe and the UK, it's presented as a corticosteroid. In the US, it's presented as an innovative drug, which creates a lot of confusion about how will this be prescribed and how will this be used and how this will be monitored. I have to admit that my impression is that vamorolone, if you ask me in the short term, I think that will be a large intake from vamorolone. So corticosteroids, I think that are the bad guys. So everybody dislike corticosteroid, to be kind, but everybody needs corticosteroid. So as soon as we suggest an alternative that can have even just a few less side effects, I think that the intake, especially from the patient community, is very high. However, so I think that in the short term, we will see a lot of patients that want to change from traditional corticosteroid to vamorolone. This will happen. I want to raise an issue because it has been mentioned to me that the price can have an impact on this actually. So the price of corticosteroid is very low when vamorolone, although it is obviously confidential, change country by country. So I'm not making a statement about that, but might influence the clinical decision inevitably about the use of vamorolone worldwide. If I go back to my more clinical and less economic background, that is probably what I'm more familiar with, I don't know if in 10 years' time we will still be seeing vamorolone, in 15 years' time or we will go back. Because the reality is that we are going to prescribe a drug for which we have data limited to a short period of time, and there is a lot of unknown after. So will patient then remain on corticosteroid, on vamorolone in 10, 15 years' time? It's something that generally I don't know, depends on several factors. But I also remember that when we start prescribe prednisone and deflazacort in Duchenne, we did not have 10 years data or 15 years data in the population, and then is where we are. So I think that there are a lot of some genuine clinical indecision and other that probably are less clinical and more economic or patient focused.
So I would like to have now a bit of time for the audience. I don't know if there are people that want to ask questions. We have still 10 minutes to go. So it's Jorge, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much for this debate, discussion. I was paying much attention, and I have the reflection in two senses or three. The first one goes for the molecular basis of the effect of the corticosteroids. Michela says, as everybody does, the anti-inflammatory within the brackets, right? So do we have the feeling that we still don't understand much of what corticosteroids do over a disease that, as has been said, is far more complex than just inflammation in muscle? That's on one side, on the molecular side. And in line what Liesbeth was saying concerning what patients want to have as a result of a trial or a drug or whatever intervention we do, we have another debate, which is the scales and the things we are measuring as a result. How far are we of being assertive in terms of really measuring what the patients need? Because I think we agree, we have that feeling that the drug does one thing, the patient wants another, and we, the physicians or the health system, is measuring a different thing altogether. So we will never be able to, in that way, I say, to find a happy ending on those trials. I believe. I don't know what's your thinking about that.
Excellent. So who wants to go?
Well, I'm happy to try to answer or to go further the debate. I think, yeah, for the steroids, you are absolutely right. Corticosteroids, I think there is more than just anti-inflammatory aspects of steroids. There is also on synthesis of protein synthesis and also this kind of aspects that are very important. We see this also like bodybuilding and those kind of aspects that are involved here as well, and that we may not copy with other drugs that are just only targeting the inflammatory aspects. So that's fine. I think your other aspects on outcome measures and on trial design, I think this is very important about scales and what we are using and what we are measuring and what is but I think there we should try to make a distinction or try to understand better understand indeed how good outcome measures and I think like surrogate endpoint could be surrogate endpoints are measuring what the drug is doing on the muscle, like making the muscle stronger or less deteriorating, and how this does translate into daily life of the children, and that's obviously the most important. And I think that's what we witness as physicians over the time. You can have like 1 point more or 2 point more, which is statistically fantastically significant, but what does it mean for the life of the child? So I fully agree, and I think that's what we experience, and that's also, I think, our responsibility towards pharma companies, and when we are involved in discussion of protocols or even assessing the results or interpretation of the results, trying to keep our feet on the ground and say, yeah, but what does this really mean for the patient?
Yeah, I think I agree with you, Nathalie. I think that we need to continue measuring the results of the drug once they are in the market, no? What they now
Absolutely.
call how they call this now, the real life evidence, no? And so that's
Absolutely,
very important to understand what happens after 5 years, because the
yeah,
trials
yeah,
end in 48 months.
yeah,
And then
yeah.
the companies, there is always a hype, and the companies sometimes sell that in this period of time the drug is fantastic. So
Yeah.
what happens after 5 years? This is what we want to know. Juliana, you have a question.
Yes, first I would like to congratulations for this section. It was very nice, and congratulations also Nathalie for the brilliant career. And I'd like to ask about the gene therapy, because it's time to use the gene therapy in this form that we have now in the real world. We do not need a long follow-up of these patients, because it was approved in a fast track in FDA. And now we are dealing with this situation in many countries, because it's very expensive and we don't know the duration. So I would like to discuss, to hear about that.
Who wants to go?
I can start a little bit, because I'm passionate on these issues, to say that there is one component that is the clinical trial, and is what do we measure over a certain period of time? Is the ideal, is the outcome measure, is the right outcome measure, or is the drug that doesn't work? And that is a little bit of a philosophical discussion, because, you know, at the end of the day, you cannot do a clinical trial for 20 years to answer these questions. But on the other hand, what is the meaningful, the meaning of a small change in an outcome measure, and over a certain period of time in an over-selected population follow up within a clinical trial setting? What does it mean? And these and again, give the answer to patient about the expectation, and what do they sign in taking on a certain drug, and what is the expectation in the long term of the effect of this drug. We are still in the point where anything is good for the patient, because there are no alternative. But and I really think that what we are behind is the collection of real world of data in the real world, and we're still debating about the what need to be measured, and the power of data, and the commercialization of the data, when actually probably that is the area where the patient should become again the focus, and we need to find an agreement in terms of data collection and publication of the data. And I think that this has to be the focus in the upcoming years more than anything else.
Anything else from anyone?
No, I think I completely agree. It's indeed from the patient community side, people are waiting for these kind of drugs, but we need to be careful. And real world data collection, it's really one of the weak points in how we are developing drugs in this disease. And it's in a way, it's not really understandable why it's still a weak point, but it seems to be very difficult to collect in a standardized way as many data as possible, because this is extremely important to give these answers to the patient community in the end, which does not mean that we should not bring these drugs at a certain point to the patients and to the market before we have the answers. But I completely agree that that's an important element to follow up.
Perfect. So, well, I'm conscious of the hour, so we are arriving to an end. So I think that we can probably close here. So I would like to first say thank you to the WMS people that have supported this. So Claire, Catherine, and Sadi, thank you very much for making this possible. I would like to thank also Michela and Liesbeth for joining and asking questions and participating in the debate. Nathalie, thank you very much for saying yes to being interviewed and putting you on the spot with all these questions. And of course, thank you very much to the audience. Thank you for coming, and thank you for making questions. So we have another Myology Café in 1 month approximately. I hope that you have enjoyed this one and that you join the next one that is coming. Thanks again, and have a nice evening or day or wherever you are.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jordi.
Thank you.
It's a fun work. Thank you.
Nice to see you, Nathalie.
Yeah, well, it was good to see you all. And there is just one thing I forgot to mention about mentoring. I think the World Muscular Society, meeting all the people there every year has been key also for my career. Absolutely, as encouragement and to how to become enthusiastic about the project, to make projects, to network. So yes, I should have made more publicity for the World Muscular Society, because this has been. I'm really a very faithful member of the World Muscular Society. I only missed two congresses since the beginning of the World Muscular Society. So yes, it has been a very important for me. Yeah. So thank you, World Muscular Society.
Thanks, Nathalie. So bye. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Jordi, as well.